and welcome to the SmackDown preview. I'm Adam Wilbourn from What Culture, joined by one of the Dudley boys, Michael Hamflett from What Culture, and Phil Chambers from What Culture, to look ahead to tonight's go-home episode ahead of Money in the Bank of SmackDown on Fox. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, for daily wrestling podcasts where we not only review Raw and SmackDown, but also the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT pay-per-views. We have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on wrestle culture. But as I said, joined by Phil and Michael to look ahead to tonight's episode of SmackDown on Fox. But before we get into that, we should deal with it's not really breaking news, but the developing story of Roman Reigns and the WWE. It's been reported for over a week now. The fact that Roman Reigns not only is obviously not going to WWE, we assumed due to the fact he was immunocompromised, that no doubt plays a factor in it. Also, he seemingly has been edited out of WWE's history books temporarily. He was completely cut from the clip of Seth Rollins cashing in at WrestleMania 31 on Monday Night Raw, as you'll have seen. But anyway, more developments with that coming out today with a report from TMZ revealing the real reason Roman Reigns is staying at home. Obviously, an element, as I said, has to do with his leukemia. And in fact, he's partially immunocompromised. But he had a little bit to say about that. Reigns said, a lot of people, they think it was based off my health and the history of my fight against leukemia. Talking to my doctors and stuff, I'm actually fine. My immune system is good. The real reason he is choosing to stay at home, it is to protect his young children. You may remember a while back we reported he was expecting twins. Those twins have been born now. He's just had he hasn't, his partner has just had two newborn twins. They are 8 weeks old. So he made the decision to stay at home to protect them. He went on to say, I want to be out there. I want to get back to work. I want to get back to normal. But I feel like I have an obligation not only to my family and myself, but to my community. Michael Hamflett, your initial reaction to this news?
Brilliant. Just more brilliance from Roman Reigns. Isn't it nice when a real reason isn't a disturbing truth? It's a good one. Like, Roman Reigns has done the right thing by his family. He's done the right thing by his local community, as you've illustrated there. But more importantly, and I'm not overstating this here, he's doing the right thing for the whole world. The whole world has to act exactly the same way for these problems, shall we call them, to be addressed, for the situation to ease, for curves to be flattened. And wrestlers might feel under pressure, would rather not do that, but have no choice. They feel bound to their bosses who are telling them to go to work. And this is WWE, this is AEW, this is not a Wednesday Night War or a biases thing. There are promoters that are making poor decisions. There are networks that are probably telling those promoters to make poor decisions. And the wrestlers and their families and communities are the ones to suffer. Roman Reigns has shown bravery and the courage of his conviction. And it's just more to be admired about Roman Reigns, as if there wasn't already, which is all the more frustrating that they're currently going through the process of kind of eking him out of the way and erasing him from little moments and just keeping his name out of their mouths, as they like to say now. It's one of them things where WWE kind of can't help itself, and you sense that all of these things will count against Reigns if and when he does come back from being that top babyface. The guy that they couldn't have wanted to push more becomes an even bigger hero than he already was when they were pretending he was one, and now they probably won't want to use him as one.
Yeah, Phil, it's amazing that like Hamflett says, with all they've tried over the years to try and get Roman Reigns over, him just being Joe, I suppose, for the most part, is the nicest thing you can talk about with him.
Yeah, it's mad. And you talk about like him being the locker room leader there as well. Like, what better way to represent yourself as a locker room leader, as being the only guy at the time that was willing to stand up and say, no, this is a bit weird. I don't really want to do this. I have responsibilities to my children. I've got to keep this right. And just doing everything the right way. Even to the point where people were assuming it was because he was immunocompromised with the leukemia stuff, and he just wanted to keep that private side of his life private. Even to that point, you can't fault him at all. Just every part of this is just the right thing to do, and probably gave someone like Sami Zayn a bit of courage to actually go to WWE and say, look, guys, I don't really want to be there. I want to be at home. I want to do what is the socially responsible thing. So yeah, couldn't ask for more from him, really.
And Phil, we reported in the news this morning that Vince's not opinion, I say per se, is decision making on how they deal with this Roman Reigns situation changes seemingly by whatever way the wind turns or whatever side of bed he gets out of. A bit ridiculous, all that, isn't it?
Yeah, this sheds a whole new light on the erasing Roman Reigns from WWE history thing as well. If it's not like, they surely can't argue against either of these things, whether it was because he was immunocompromised due to the leukemia. You can't argue with that as a health reason, but you also probably shouldn't argue with the fact that he just wants to stay safe and keep his kids safe. But it probably shines a whole new light on what Vince McMahon's been doing and why they are sort of doing this erasing from his thing.
It's insane that they're choosing to do this, obviously, Hamflett, but it's mad that they would punish anyone for this when, like you said, they've at least said explicitly, you decide whatever you think is right for you. And it makes me very concerned about Sami Zayn.
Well, this is it, isn't it? Like, they wouldn't call it a punishment, but we know it's a tacit one by the promoters, the billionaires, because there are no babyface billionaires, let's call them what they are, by them telling their wrestlers, yeah, you can do what you want, and then responding this way when a wrestler does what he wants. It sends quite a message out to those that maybe don't feel like they've got the power or the stroke to do the same thing. Sami Zayn has shown guts in a difficult time. This is important. Wrestlers, much like businesses that have like operated not in the way that you would have liked in this period, these wrestlers should be remembered for their bravery, because they're not just acting for themselves. Roman Reigns particularly, Phil makes a great point about Roman being a locker room leader, and here what he's done is he's kind of taken on the role as a union rep in an industry without a union. I think he's hoped by making such a stand, and don't forget the timing with which he made this stand. He took himself out of the WrestleMania main event. This wasn't just, I'm not going to miss SmackDown this week. He took himself out of a title match he was booked to win right before WrestleMania because it was the right thing to do. He wasn't worried about the risk of that main event. He was worried about the risk of people's health and people's lives. And I'm sure he did that with the hope that others would feel confident and comfortable to follow suit. And then right around the time where some wrestlers might have made that decision, loads of them were let go. And the ones that stayed are now probably job scared more than ever before, having seen all the releases that have dropped. The axe has swung, and WWE immediately took that power back. So everything kind of hangs in the balance here, to the point where even Roman Reigns' position on the card, you are now left to question if indeed they'll ever push him again with the guile and the determination that they seem to push him with once upon a time. As I said before, I don't think there's ever going to be a babyface reaction to him quite like the one he gets when he returns. That music that used to signify, oh no, that that always makes me think of your reaction to that guy's reaction at the Royal Rumble 2017. That has never been there to elicit such a pop. We talk about the dream moments when WWE get their crowds back as if magically overnight the people are going to flood in, and how great it would be if it was Baron Corbin that was the first time it came out. But Roman Reigns punching the floor as the second one with pyro and everything would be incredible. But it almost feels like the Vince McMahon run WWE might not want to do that now.
Before we get on to tonight's episode of SmackDown, very quickly, just to balance things out, because we often get accused of bias here at What Culture, we were highly, highly critical of AEW this week on Dynamite and their management of the situation and use of Jake the Snake Roberts, weren't we, Hamflett?
Yeah. Like, just to clarify some things there, everyone can have their opinion on whether or not Jake Roberts leering over top of Brandy and thrusting, like the phallic implications of all of that. You can decide if you want to, whether you think that's in good taste. I think collectively we as a three on that review podcast didn't. And generally speaking, the polls seem to be that that's maybe not okay in 2020. But some people compared it to Game of Thrones and other shows, and heat is heat. It's a far more subjective one. What isn't subjective is the reality of a man in a high-risk category for both health and age reasons, working with a mask that he's been given that he then just lets slip under his chin anyway, not to mention the fact that he was surrounded by others, the complete flouting of social distancing at every point in that show. Yeah, they can put the crowd, the wrestlers like spaced a few meters apart, but look how many people were present for that brawl. Look at the people when Brandy Rhodes threw Britt Baker's shoe that were just randomly sat off camera, including children. You know, there was obviously plenty of people at that show. Tony Khan tweeted to say that COVID tests have been done, but it's much like WWE talking about wiping the mats and wiping the ropes. It's all just stuff we have to kind of accept at face value without knowing just how valid or how valuable that kind of effort being made actually is. The winning solution, as we keep beating people over the head with, would be to not run shows. Everything else is secondary and a case of wrestling deeming itself essential, both AEW and WWE.
Right, let's move on and talk about tonight's episode of SmackDown on Fox. We've got the return of Jeff Hardy, Mandy Rose versus Sonya Deville, and Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman face to face, along with a whole load of other things. But let's start with the mystery partner angle. Phil, you obviously watch SmackDown every week. You review it as part of our What Culture Wrestling podcasts, which are out. Or you do search for What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts from. Tonight it is going to be King Corbin, Shinsuke Nakamura, and Cesaro versus Daniel Bryan, Drew Gulak, and a mystery partner. Phil, if you had to put your house vote on it, who would you go for this mystery partner being?
It's a weird one, this one, because the mystery partner is actually a mystery. Like, thinking of who they've got lying around, I don't know who they could put in the place. Like, immediately I thought Jeff Hardy, but he's already announced to be on the show. It'd be an odd place to put him back. They've been, with the sort of promo packages that they've been using for him, you expect him to come back in some kind of small squashish kind of match, and then there'll be something to do with Sheamus in that. And I mean, they've got to build to the Sheamus thing, so why would they throw that into the tag team mix? I'm not entirely sure, other than that's a slot that they can put him in. But other than that, I'm not entirely sure who would even be right for that role at the minute.
Hamflett, what are you thinking?
I've got the guy. He's been one of the biggest babyface breakout stars of the empty arena era. He's a fixture on WWE television. We know he's available, and he improves every time we see him out there. Denzel Dejournette has his big moment as selected by Daniel Bryan as another guy like Drew Gulak was, being unappreciated by the office, by the head honchos within WWE, but he's been watching. He's seen what Denzel has had to offer in those very small squashes in that very cool amateur wrestling gear, and out he comes tonight for his big moment, and then gets his head kicked clean off by Shinsuke Nakamura. But the intent of Daniel Bryan to try and elevate this guy would be fantastic, and it would play, if nothing else, to something that we've all kind of got in our own headcanon, that this is actually a story that they're telling, with Dejournette's like gradual improvements in these really impressive squashes. These kick-ins that he's taking every single week might actually lead somewhere, and this would be as acute a place as any to drop him in.
I actually take back everything that I've just said. I forgot that Baron Corbin was in the match, so it's going to be Elias. They just can't let go, can they? It's 100% Elias.
Yeah, I can see it being someone like Elias. I think Jeff Hardy, the tie-in with his return would be interesting, but I sense, as you said, Phil, the ongoing stuff you've got with him and Sheamus suggests it's going to be some sort of relatively straightforward match for Jeff Hardy that will, after a Swanton Bomb victory, whatever, is going to be interrupted by Sheamus to build towards hopefully a pay-per-view match in the future between these two men, because they've been building up Jeff Hardy for quite some time. I was chatting to Andy Murray about this earlier, and he suggested Chad Gable, which would be very interesting. Most people seem to think that the hacker gimmick is going to be revealed on Sunday at Money in the Bank. Most people there believe that is going to be Mustafa Ali, of course, although there's been speculation whether it could be Punk or Mustafa Ali and Chad Gable. So it's going to be very interesting to see what that is going forward. But at least a bit of a hook for tonight's episode of SmackDown on Fox. And Hamflett, another tease ahead of Money in the Bank is Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman face to face. How are you feeling about this feud, and how are you feeling about the match on Sunday, considering, according to WWE at least, it's not The Fiend versus Braun Strowman, it's Bray?
Yeah, I'm not feeling great about any of this, to be honest. The Firefly Funhouse match at WrestleMania was a recovery for the ages for that character. They took that character that had been like effectively buried by what happened in the Seth Rollins feud, and then was just him trying to crawl his way out of the dirt month after month after month, only for Goldberg to stick one boot on his head and put him all the way down 6 foot under. If you remember that scene of The Fiend pointing to the WrestleMania sign against John Cena, it was shot beautifully, but The Fiend looked about 4 foot tall in the shadow of the champ, and then that Firefly Funhouse match completely rehabilitated him. And I think we all said, just keep him away from the title for a bit. Just give him more things to do that don't revolve around things important, so you can get this character back to having a sense of purpose again. Straight back in against the Universal Champion Braun Strowman. It tells me by not advertising Bray Wyatt advertising Bray Wyatt instead of The Fiend, that they're probably not going to go to a clean finish on Sunday as well. I would possibly expect either Bray or Braun to get disqualified, and then us to get the lights, a bit of laughing, and then them come back on to find The Fiend hovering over Braun with a mandible claw, something like that, to give us one more month of this stuff. As relates to a face-to-face, I've got reasonable expectations for this, because when they used the recorded nature of the shows the ambience of the Performance Center with things like Bray's puppets at ringside and the Fiend in the podium and Bray in the ring with John Cena. All that stuff worked really, really well. So this could be a much needed shot in the arm for the feud that's kind of had to be carried by Braun Strowman's dreadful acting. The staring at the sheet mask or that bye thing that he did that's going to haunt me forever. I don't need any of that. So we're looking at Bray to carry this one.
Phil, how are you feeling ahead of Sunday?
Yeah, not hugely excited about this one, gotta admit. I think there's lots they can do in a filmed environment that with sort of the Fiend and Bray Wyatt there together. Like just little cinematic things that they can do with like the Fiend pointing behind and there's like Bray Wyatt pointing and there's the Fiend and things like that. And I think like obviously Braun Strowman was not their choice for this champion at all going into WrestleMania. But they found themselves in this position, and if they need someone in an empty arena environment to carry the title, there's much worse than you can do than Bray at the minute. At least you've got the chance to do crazy cinematic matches and things, like do something a little bit different with that tight championship compared to like what the stuff they're doing with Drew over on Raw. So whereas it definitely wasn't their plan to go into this. I think we'll probably get something entertaining at Money in the Bank. And it's just a bit sad for Braun. Remember back when we all bloody loved Braun once upon a time?
Intriguing feud. Yeah, one of the most intriguing feuds you've got going on right now on SmackDown. Phil, you are contractually obliged to watch SmackDown, of course. Is Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville? They've developed this wonderfully.
Yeah, absolutely. This is possibly the longest running storyline in WWE at the minute. And one where just every week, whether it's something weird or something cute or just something odd that happens between these two, I'm loving every bit of it. I like that it's elevated both Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose and Otis at the same time. I love that somehow Sonya Deville's using Dolph Ziggler as this weird little pawn in this bizarre little triangle. Whatever happens, I'm assuming that the match on SmackDown is going to go to some kind of no contest. Whether they just end up brawling again like they did last week, but Sonya Deville didn't hold back in that brawl last week. And then this match gets added to Money in the Bank or something a bit more set in stone. Like I don't see them why they'd give this away on a SmackDown.
Yeah, it seems a hot shot decision to just chuck it on the go home show ahead of Money in the Bank, as you say, and it's kind of a shame, Hamflett, that these two both aren't in the women's Money in the Bank ladder match.
Yeah, it's one of them things, isn't it, where at Money in the Bank time, every wrestler tells you that there's no greater opportunity than Money in the Bank. But if wrestlers happen to be in the middle of their own issue, it's as if they're going on and they just sort of conveniently ignore it. And that's what's happened with Deville and Rose this year. But as Phil's pointed out, this angle is kind of hotter than that anyway. They're in a position where they're in a better spot by feuding with each other and having an actual emotional reason to want to fight each other than just a climbing contest for a briefcase that they might end up losing. Sonya Deville last week was given the ultra rare double bitch, the other bitch. Like that's like I can't think of a better indication of who's getting a major push in WWE than that right now. So they know that she's numbered. The work is generally good between the two. For the longest time, Fire and Desire or Sex and Violence were probably two of the more underrated wrestlers in the SmackDown Women's division, and we're just kind of out there to lose tag matches or warm bodies as heels against other baby faces. So it is really nice to have the spotlight on them. And with Otis in the Money in the Bank and Dolph Ziggler now starting to become a bit more marginalized in it, I'd like to see the focus pointed squarely on these two. They'll want this to work really well. We know they're friends. We know they've come up together. And you kind of have to trust that chemistry that they're going to want to make this as good as it can possibly be.
I'm glad that they're leaving it between those two as well, like the brawl on SmackDown. Like Otis wasn't involved in that, and if it's a really, really personal story, obviously, between the two of them. So I hope they let the two of them sort it out and not let anyone else get involved.
Yeah, I think Sonya Deville is arguably one of the best things about Friday Night SmackDown right now. I really hope that they not only develop Mandy Rose's character with this Otis storyline, which we speculated on the news this morning that they may well decide to do a SmackDown wedding, considering that does numbers and nothing does numbers for WWE right now. But I hope Sonya Deville's character continues because I feel like she's really, we've all, as fans, I know in particular Andy Murray was a fan of hers for quite some time, always hoped that WWE would finally recognize what talent she has, and that appears to be happening right now. Speaking of female feuds, we also have another match tonight, Tamina and Lacey Evans versus Bayley and Sasha Banks. This, of course, ahead of Tamina versus Bayley for the SmackDown Women's Championship on Sunday. I asked this to Phil Chambers in Wrestle Culture, our podcast, which will be out very, very soon. So I'm going to ask it to you now, Michael Hamflett. Is there anybody meaner than Tamina?
Well, I can think of one person, and he might be on her family tree. But in terms of this specific match and Tamina's place in it, I really, really like the SmackDown Women's Division. And I would say quietly this has been happening. But now I think about it, I haven't shut up about this in any podcast that I'm allowed to talk about it, like justifiably so. Something has just happened in the background with the SmackDown Women's Division, where the more I look at it, the more everybody feels like they've got something going on. So Carmella and Dana Brooke have got like a half-baked tag team where there might be tension, and they're both qualified for Money in the Bank, and how that's going to play into their match on Sunday, we don't know. Tamina has got a title shot in a time where, because there's no crowds, you can't hear the sense of nobody reacting to her entrance. So she feels more like likely as a challenger than ever before. In the meantime, you've got Lacey Evans that's been like kind of a surprise hit as a babyface that I don't think anybody would have saw coming. You kind of, I don't know if it's because Vince McMahon's obviously got huge faith in her characteristics being babyface qualities, but she's put so much work into that you kind of believe the courage of her convictions. And in the meantime, Sasha and Bayley's angle has been so carefully and meticulously plotted to the point where nothing is being rushed. Like, you're watching this relationship crumble and fall apart in a way where I remember when we were previewing WrestleMania in, say, January, I think it was you, Wilbourn, pitched, well, we're going to have to do Sasha and Bayley, aren't we? And we were all like, oh, I guess so. I don't want to see it. But they've reached a point now where you really want to see it. Bayley is abusing the trust that Sasha's got for her. Sasha is not acting overtly because she's got her eye on the prize. She wants the title. And they're doing little things every week that tease this story out. And what it's doing now is that it's informing other programs. So Bayley and, I'm hesitant to use the word heat because there's nobody in the goddamn building, but like Bayley and Tamina has the empty arena era version of heat because there is at least a reason for this match to take place and a few moving parts in the case of the boss and the, what did they used to call Lacey Evans? The sassy Southern Belle, that have got like well-drawn characteristics that might interject on the night. Like, this tag match is that natural go-home show thing that WWE do, but the match it's leading to has been quite well built.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really looking forward to this match tonight, and obviously to Sunday, with a sort of morbid fascination surrounding that championship match, because, yeah, like you said, it makes the most sense to hoy Tamina in there for a temporary match to build to potentially, I don't know, obviously we can't really guess with the state of things being as they are, but potentially a SummerSlam match, let's say, between Bayley and Sasha Banks once everything all falls to pieces. But there's people speculating that Sasha could cost Bayley on Sunday to help Tamina because of their history, or vice versa. So who knows? Yeah, I'm looking forward to SmackDown tonight. Let's go to the comment section. Thanks once again, as always, for your questions, for your donations. Mr. Phoenix, regulars contributor. I'm going to ask this one to you, Phil. Says, as a forklift driver, I always get an extra pop when wrestlers use heavy machinery. Anything like that for you guys? Phil, what is that like for you when you see cameramen getting involved in matches?
Yeah. I can't say I've ever thought about massive pops for heavy machinery, other than the obvious ones of any time a forklift is involved in wrestling. You've got to love it. Gotta love it.
Another question from Mr. Phoenix here, actually, which I'm going to pitch to Hamflett, stir the pot, seeing as there's no Michael Sidgwick today. Who will be the first called up from AEW, says Mr. Phoenix. I assume he means making the jump to WWE.
I would say that's an unfair dig without Sidgwick here, but you put Andy Murray on an NXT preview podcast, so it's 1-1 for the week, isn't it? For weeks and weeks, the answer to this question was Britt Baker, wasn't it? It felt like the NXT women's division were the place where she belonged, and yet she has burst out of her shell to become this incredible, like what feels now like a homegrown creation. So, and with apologies to Mr. Phoenix, this is with huge respect to the AEW star-making process. I don't know the answer to that question at the moment. I just sense that everybody there wants to be there, sees a future for themselves, and senses that even if things aren't happening right now, there's always going to be a tomorrow. Everyone's entered into the ranking system, even when... So an obvious one for me would be someone like an Austin Gunn. Okay, like he's very inexperienced, he's very raw. If WWE were to make friends with Billy Gunn and offer him a big money deal to come back, just to be spiteful to AEW. Then he might bring his son with him, and you look at that. But then if you're Austin Gunn, would you not think, well, maybe I'm in better hands here? Like, they fired you about 10 times. Like, what's to say that you're going to protect me if you get me back in at the Performance Center? It's really hard at the moment to see who might end up going the other way. And that's not a cop-out answer. That is genuinely a huge credit to how fresh the landscape feels in AEW. NXT and WWE more specifically, for the first time in a long time, hasn't looked like the most attractive of places to work. A lot of that is of WWE's own doing. But certainly if you've got one of those Tony contracts, I wouldn't be tearing it up to go work for Vincent McMahon right about now.
No, it's tough, isn't it, Phil? Because you think about people. I was actually listening to a podcast from Brian Alvarez talking about all this, and he was discussing the same thing and saying basically, you're obviously not going to get any of the higher ups for obvious reasons. You're going to have to eye up like mid carders. But then you think about that. I mean, the names they suggested was people like Joey Janela, and Joey Janela, as we know, we've interviewed and we've chatted to him in the past. He's got his own side projects and stuff that he likes to work on. That would have to be put paid to that. And I sense that WWE isn't the place for him. As much as I'd love to see someone like an MJF or a Darby Allin in WWE, they wouldn't make the jump, would they, Phil? And it would be the wrong place for them almost.
Yeah, like Hamflett said, everyone in AEW seems happy to be there and happy that they're building this big brand. Like, you look at a lot of the roster was big name on the independents, like all the Elite and everyone like that. But there was a reason they were big name on the independents, and it's because they either didn't want to go to WWE or WWE didn't see them as WWE guys. But I guess like the only people I can think of is like a Wardlow would be maybe a bit more of a WWE guy, but then he stands out in AEW because of that very fact, and he's the only one. But I mean, ever since AEW started, we've spoke about the big jumps from WWE to AEW, but like no one's ever really brought up when that first big jump from AEW to WWE is going to be, and I wonder how much of a big deal that is it actually going to be, or what the circumstances behind that are going to be when it actually happens.
Not to name names specifically, because there isn't anybody that leaps out to mind, but I would still say if I was a female, NXT would look a brighter prospect to me than AEW. If I was on the independent scene and really keen to get a big opportunity and a big spotlight in a way that would probably use me best, I still feel like that division is marginalized in AEW compared to NXT, where it is separated and constantly changing.
Yeah, we could see someone like a B. Priestley perhaps making that jump. Very good point, that. I think the only other name that I can think of, big name that I could see making a move, is Chris Jericho, because he just flips back and forth between all the companies. But he does seem, and he said this before in his podcast, to be enjoying the fact he can work for AEW. He's obviously done stuff for New Japan. He's got a lot more freedom over there. And I says they probably won't be best pleased with half the interviews he's done recently. But anyway, let's move on. Ethan Wendelken, thank you for your donation, asks, most underrated wrestler in the last 25 years. Phil, why don't you go first, and then we'll pass it over to the Wrestling Encyclopedia.
Ooh, in the last 25 years, I'll probably go Shelton Benjamin, because every time that guy's in a ring, he is bloody great. And you think back to some of the amazing matches he's had, like ladder matches and things, and all the world's greatest tag team stuff, but never, ever, ever had a fair shake in WWE. And I think like he's a massive missed opportunity. So yeah, I'm going to go with Shelton Benjamin.
I mean, 25 years is such a long time, but there's never been a point where underrated's like been so flimsy a term, because there's so many places for wrestlers to become big stars now. If not AEW or NXT or WWE, you're talking like you can become a major big deal on the independent scene and be a star in your own time and make a living off your pro wrestling tee store. For me, the guy, it's funny that Phil said Shelton Benjamin. I went to Chad Gable straight away. His career is 6-7 years old tops in the WWE system, and yet in that time you can, with evidence, point to him helping get Jason Jordan over, then coming to the main roster and American Alpha being completely let down by and being split up by that daft Kurt Angle stipulation. Shelton Benjamin himself's comeback was helped inordinately by Chad Gable. You know, Bobby Roode's floundering main roster run was helped by Chad Gable. They dress him up like he's in Space Jam, and he can stay over because his moves and his energy and his charisma and everything he puts into that, like, his psychology is superb and so sound. He knows just when to fire off that electric comeback. He's got strength that you wouldn't think of a guy his stature, and that's not me calling him short. That's just me saying for a smaller guy, you wouldn't think he'd have that strength, but he's got that same explosive quality that Kurt Angle had that must come from that Olympic amateur background. And it just feels like an era that is letting Chad Gable down and a company that is letting Chad Gable down, rather than, say, a Cesaro, who I love, and is always thought of as a guy that hasn't been given the opportunities he deserves. But then look how cool the Bar were. And it's like, well, maybe it was okay that Cesaro was just this really awesome, super strong tag wrestler, and he didn't need to be world champion. Chad Gable feels like a guy for me, like a Kurt Angle or like a Shawn Michaels or a Bret Hart, that should break molds by winning world titles, and he's just not being put in those spots to ever even have the chance.
I think Cesaro as
bit
well.
Of nepotism here.
Oh, sorry. I think like with Cesaro as well, like everyone knows how good he is. He's been put in spots before where he's literally only there because he's that damn good at wrestling that they need someone for like this match, like when they sent him to NXT UK and things like that. Like in-ring performer, I don't think he's underrated. He's just not had the like position to be a top star or whatever, but I don't think anyone underrates his work.
No, exactly. I mean, the fact that they just go, right, we need someone to have a good match with Mansoor, sod it, let's chuck him in with him in Saudi Arabia. Mine was going to be quite a nepotistic, if that's a word, answer. Friend of mine, best friend, if anything, Stu Bennett. I'm genuinely astonished they never put the World Championship on him. I love Stu. I think he's a phenomenal promo. There was the clip you put up the other day, Hamflett, on Twitter of the just before SummerSlam Nexus versus Team Cena or whatever you want to call it. And I glanced at him. I said, "Oh, there's my boy." The missus was looking at it.
Hard camera shaking because the crowd are so excited for it.
It was just, and it's not just the Nexus, although it still annoys me because I really pissed off with what they did, with how they just ruin that and the whole Wade Barrett character. But the fact he reinvented himself on numerous occasions and WWE just couldn't see it. It's just outrageous that he wasn't the first. No offense to Drew McIntyre, but how he wasn't the first British WWE World Champion is ridiculous, in my opinion. Right, let's rattle through some final questions before we wrap up here today. Megatoby09 Hamflett says, with 15 plus titles in WWE, could they benefit from retiring some?
Yes. And pick any ones you want. Say the Universal, the WWE, and the Intercontinental, and the tags, and then for both male and female divisions, obviously, and then get rid of anything else that's excess.
Fair enough. Phil Ty Farnsworth says, which title would benefit most from a 365 plus day reign?
Ooh, maybe something like the IC title if you just put it on an absolute workhorse who goes out there and has amazing matches all the time. But I think that's all you can do with the IC title at this point, is just be the absolute best wrestler, like world-class level, but in the IC title, and just go out there and make it that workhorse title like it always used to be.
Yeah, I completely agree with that one. Edward Shiraz Hands put up a question today. He says, is someone getting pulled out of money on the roof, last minute tonight so they can have another gauntlet match? I'll also add to that, Hamflett. Is there any way they pull someone out of the match last minute and chuck someone else in on Sunday?
Well, it's all been taped, hasn't it? But that's not to say they haven't taped somebody being pulled out. They reset the precedent last year by having Brock Lesnar come in at the very last minute. And that's another reason why the Hacker being unveiled as Ali on the night of Money in the Bank, the night of his one of the many times he was screwed last year, would be quite a cute reveal if he was to insert himself in. I've got this nagging feeling they might drop Drake Maverick in there as well, as he attempts in yet another way to try and secure the safety of his job, because this appears to be something that are just persevering within NXT. What a better way to do that, by not just winning the interim championship, but having a briefcase that guarantees you a shot at another one. I feel like the final lineups, might not be all they quite seem. And thank you very much for your donation, any question, and your support of Podcast Horseman, Edward Shiraz Hands.
Final question today comes from Matt Reigns, aptly talking about Roman Reigns, his brother-in-arms, no doubt. Of course, the lead story today, the real reason Roman Reigns is at home, not actually due to the fact he's immunocompromised. In an interview with TMZ, he said a lot of people assumed it was based off his health and the history of his fight against leukemia, but talking to his doctors, he said he's fine, his immune system is good. The real reason he is at home rather than on WWE is, first of all, despite the fact he wants to be there, he said he felt like an obligation not only to his family and himself, but his community. But also, he's just had two newborn twin boys that are 8 weeks old. He made the decision to protect his young children, completely justified, fully supported by everyone here at What Culture, of course. But Matt Reigns asks, would you just hold off on Roman coming back till the Rumble to get things back to normal as projected? Phil, what do you reckon?
I don't know. I see them as soon as it's available to them, that they just bring him back straight away. But he said another thing in that TMZ interview as well, where he said that looking forwards, he has no idea when he'll be back, because obviously they're just looking at it today and seeing what the best facts are out there. And I think just the fact that he's looking there, he's looking at the science, he's looking at like researching himself, what is actually like going on, what the best thing to do is, what the most socially responsible thing to do is for him and his family. That says even more about anything about Roman Reigns than you could possibly hope for, because it seems like he won't come back until the facts are there that this is safe, this is okay, this is a socially responsible thing to do. So who knows when he could come back? But I mean, a Royal Rumble pop would be great, but who knows?
Sensible, as you say, Phil.
Yeah.
Hamflett, any final thoughts on that?
Oh, I wish they would, but they don't wait for anything anymore. My heart was broken about 3 consecutive weeks when I saw the takeover logo in the background of a match taking place in an empty performance center that I was hoping that they would hold off on, to the point where even this week, like, they'd done the NXT title match at WrestleMania and they're like, oh, we've still got the Charlotte Io Shirai thing. We'll just deliver it on television because we want to pop a number. They're waiting for nothing and they're saving nothing, seemingly. A storyline will play out ultimately when it's deemed necessary to play out, even if it doesn't really suit the surroundings. So as much as I would love Roman Reigns pop, or I would certainly love that Royal Rumble Roman Reigns pop, unless, like, if they feel like they need him, they're just going to bring him back. If he's prepared to come to work and crowds are back in the building and he's healthy and whatever, I think then he'll just be back at the first opportunity. I don't think they ever wait now.
Yeah, exactly. I should probably use this opportunity to say congratulations to Roman Reigns on the birth of his newborn twin boys, and get well soon and take as long as you need. We're all WWE fans and we all want the best for our performers, whatever promotion they work for. And like he says, the priorities have to be everyone's families right now. Right, this has been the SmackDown preview. My thanks to Phil Chambers and to Michael Hamflett. Make sure you join myself and Phil Chambers. Actually, Sunday night, we're doing a live stream of reactions to Money in the Bank. And you can let us know your thoughts on all of today's stories that we've discussed in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. Daily wrestling podcasts, including, as I said, Phil Chambers reviewing SmackDown tomorrow. You can also let us know your thoughts on Twitter at What Culture WWE. Watch there. You can follow all 3 of us. You can follow Phil Chambers at
Phil My Chambers. And I should also say that sorry about the lag on the stream, but I have been recording this and I'll put it up as a separate video afterwards, just in case you missed anything.
Hey,
there you go.
It's all good. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
You can follow me at Adam Wilbourn. Follow us all at What Culture WWE, as I said. But for now, this has been the SmackDown preview. My thanks to Phil Chambers, to Michael Hamflett, and thanks to you for all your contributions, your questions, and for joining us. And we will see you soon.